everybody, this is Seth from Travel Smith Co. Welcome to the Travel Smith Co. podcast. So we're going to discuss a topic today that I think is possibly one of the more daunting ideas of travel for a lot of people. Some people, it's not daunting at all. But so for a lot of people, one of the biggest concerns that they would have would be, how would I communicate whenever I get there? So we're going to talk about language barriers today. This can be a very daunting place. Having to try to communicate in a land where English is not a native language can be very hard, or for any person who is not their first language, whether they speak a language other than English as their first language, and come to some place that speaks English, or someone who is an English speaker goes to some place where they speak Spanish or Italian, or Swahili or Arabic, or whatever the case may be. It can be a very daunting task. Even if you're going from one place to another. I have mentioned before, my first real international experience was doing a semester of university in England. And in England, the language is English, which is my native language. One of the first things that we were taught as students there when we arrived is that they taught us words to not say, because the English in England is different than the English we use. So even in countries that use English as their native language, there can be a language barrier for native English speakers. So that is definitely a daunting task, or a daunting thing that some people would consider about traveling. If that is not something that concerns you, congratulations. I wish that were the case for all of us. However, for a lot of people, that can be an issue. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to start off my first true experience of being in some place where there was very little English. That semester of school I was in England, I actually took a weekend trip to Italy, and it was just a small village in Italy that we went to in Sicily. And there was some English there. There's some English almost everywhere you would go. Much of Europe specifically has at least some English, but there were some parts that didn't have a whole lot of English. And so for me, I was actually traveling on my birthday. Had been there a day or two before, and the day of my birthday. We were actually leaving. We had a flight on a budget airline very early in the morning, so we were going to go sleep in the airport that night and catch our flight in the morning. I was a broke college student. I had packed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with me. We had found where the bus to the airport was, and we were sitting waiting for the bus. It was going to be an hour or so for the bus to come. And I decided that a peanut butter and jelly sandwich was a pretty poor birthday dinner. And so since we were in Italy, I was going to go find pizza. And we'd had it from a couple places, but hadn't really found anything super local. We'd only been there a day or two. And so I wandered off down the streets, making sure I knew where to come back to and how long I had to not miss my bus. But as I walked down the streets looking for something to eat, I caught a delicious aroma coming down from an alley off of the side street, or off of the street that I was on. And as so many people, when they visit Italy do, I followed my nose to where the best food was. I walked into a very small local bakery where they would make pizza. They would make it custom for you. You could do what you wanted, but they also had some pizza that was made already, and they sold it by the kilo. So the only well, I didn't know any Italian. The woman who worked there, the only words that we were able to know in common, she knew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, several numbers. We knew euro, which was the currency, and kilo, because I understood that. And so using hand motions and those words, I was able to buy half a kilo of pizza for however many euros it was. And just kind of pointing at things and and using numbers and smiling a lot, bought the pizza that remains to this day possibly the best pizza I've ever had in my life. So I walked back to where the bus stop was. I had two friends that were waiting on me there. Um, they had wrapped it in a piece of brown paper. And I walked back and opened up my paper that had the pizza in it. And my two friends took one look at it and immediately left to go find pizza for themselves. And so I sat and ate the most delicious pizza that I've probably ever had, that I had managed to buy using only 1 through 5 euro in kilo. And so that was my first real entry into language barriers. So as you are prepping for a trip, here's a few tips that I have learned since then. Thankfully, I have grown and learned some tricks over the years since then. So some things to keep in mind as you're planning a trip for wherever you're going. So first, see if English is spoken there, and to what level. For people who are listening to me, most of you either know English or are native English speakers. English is somewhat of the de facto business language of the world. It is, I believe, the most widely spoken language at the moment, not as a first language, but as a language overall. It is a language that is desirable and people want to know it because it is the business language of the world. So especially if you get into a more touristy and more larger areas or more densely populated areas like cities, there is a more likely chance of finding people who speak English, as it is kind of the world business language. It is also a very popular tourist language, where you might have people who are not native English speakers talking with other people in English, and neither of them are native English speakers, but both of them know enough English that they can get by. So look and see how prevalent English is in the location that you're about to go. Another hint or another suggestion I would say would be to look at the place and see if it's a good idea to learn a few words. And this could be something, the very basics, even something like how they say hello, please, thank you, a couple of numbers. You don't have to learn the whole language. Most likely you're not going to have time to do that before you go. But many places, people appreciate that. Some places it is not as big of a deal. Some places they would rather talk to you in English than their local language, but some places there is a lot of appreciation if you at least learn a few words. So do some research into that, just because every place is different, and some places it could get you a little bit of extra appreciation from local people, even if you just know a few basic greetings. Another tip that I have started using, that I've used for several trips now, is that you can download specific languages to your phone on Google Translate. And so even if you do not have a working cell phone plan, you can have languages downloaded. It's not necessarily as useful for spoken language, but for signs or written items, it can be very useful. It can be very useful if you're in a very local restaurant, or if you're in a grocery store trying to buy stuff. You can use the camera feature on your phone to point at it, and it will, if you have the language downloaded, it will translate that into English for you. I've used it on menus. I've used it for street signs. I've used it for ingredients. There's been times we have had a train ride from one city to the next early in the morning, and we knew we would be traveling during lunch. So we went to the grocery store, found some pre-made sandwiches, but we didn't know what was in them. So we used Google Translate to see the list of ingredients and decide, okay, this is the one I want. So Google Translate has a really useful download. You can download languages on it, which is a really useful feature, and has been a big help in a lot of our travels. Another tip that you can do, that you either need Wi-Fi or a working phone plan. There have been times when I have known a few words in the language, or even known several words and could get by a good bit. Or maybe I was talking with someone who had really good English, but if there was something specific, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you can have a picture of what you are trying to talk about, it can be insanely helpful. If someone has some basic English, you can ask them, where can I find this? And show them a picture of what you're talking about. And that is a lot easier than them needing to know the word for a specific item of, I need a charging cord for my phone, or whatever the case may be. If you have a picture and you can show them, then it is a very helpful way to do that. So that is a few practical tips on that. A few thoughts to keep in mind that as you are going through any uncomfortable circumstances while facing language barriers. The first thing I would encourage you to do is to remember to smile. If you are talking with someone who doesn't understand you, and you look frustrated and angry, that's not really going to help them understand you better, and also might make them want to help you less. So if you are smiling, or at least neutral, some cultures, if you're smiling, they might think it's weird. But if you're at least not showing frustration, but being patient with the situation, it can be very helpful. Remember, we are not the ones who are messing up. So sorry, we are. I might need you to edit that part out. So remember to smile, or at least be patient with it. Just remember, they are being kind to you. They are trying to use a language that is not their native language. You are the one, and I am the one, who is speaking a foreign language and doesn't know what's going on. So if I am someplace and I don't know the language of the place, that's on me. So if someone is helping me out, I should be grateful to them that they are speaking a language that maybe isn't their native language to help me out. Another thing to keep in mind is that speaking louder and slower in English may not make them understand it better. This is the universal thing that we do. Is if I say something and someone doesn't understand it, well, I need to speak slower and I need to speak louder, and you will understand me. That doesn't work. So don't do it. It's hard to resist the urge. Speak slow and clear, but you don't need to yell at somebody. It's most likely they don't have a hearing problem. They just don't speak English, and you don't speak the language of the place you're at. So just keep that in mind. Ultimately, I would recommend to you to remember that attitude is everything. And anytime you are facing a language barrier and could be tempted to get frustrated with that, your attitude is everything with it. Just remember that one day this could be an amazing story. If I would have been really frustrated whenever I was in Italy the first time dealing with the language barrier, I wouldn't have had a great story, and I probably would not have had the best pizza I've ever had. But because at least in that particular case, I was able to keep a good attitude, I was able to be patient, and the person I was talking with was willing to work with me and be very helpful and patient with me. It turned into a great story and a great experience overall. So overall, don't let a language barrier be daunting for you. Prepare yourself for it, research it, know what you should and shouldn't do, but do not let it stop you from going on a trip somewhere. It could end up being a truly wonderful experience, and it could turn into a fun game where you are trying to constantly figure out what everyone around you is saying. So thank you guys for watching and listening again today. Once again, this is Seth from Travel Smith Co. Podcast, and hope you all have a great day.